All right. Shalom Aleichem. Good evening. I want to share with everyone some ideas that I had. Really, I feel that they're really essential concepts in Judaism. You know, there's been a long-standing, seemingly dichotomy and dispute between the rational and the mystical within Judaism. Within authentic, you know, Torah true Judaism. And a lot of my friends in recent years have been, taking sides in these issues. Or, which is it? And they, all throughout history there have been, movements surrounding these things. The people who espouse these movements really, always recognized one and the other, to have, respect even where they disagreed, and often they found there wasn't really the disagreement the way people think. But people like to belong to movements, so the Hamon Am, the average person in these movements, often felt like, oh, I'm part of this party, I'm part of this movement, and so therefore, I espouse this and everyone else is wrong. Now, all the people who espoused these movements, who founded these movements, who led these movements, did not teach like this. If in the Tanya, there's the Geras HaKodesh, there's a letter that the ballot wrote when he, B'tziyasim in Peterburg, when he left prison in St. Petersburg. He says, "Katonti mikol chasadim." He said, I was. He quoted what Yaakov Avinu, what Jacob said, "I was made small by all the kindness which you had given to me." And similarly, all throughout history, there was, the leaders of all these movements have always respected one another. On the other hand, with the common people, have felt like, oh, and this is what, actually what the Balatanya warned against, not to be hissing against, anyone from another side of different movements and so forth, but rather to have love for one another and to hope, like King Solomon says, and Shlomo Melech said, that, Kamayim upon him, that just as one heart reflects, just as the water reflects a person's face and makes a reflection, so too the hearts of other people reflect, what we, how we feel. And, if we have positive feelings for others, they'll also have positive feelings as a reflection. And, particularly when it comes to these questions of, mysticism versus rationalism. So how do we, is there a way to reconcile this dichotomy? What exactly are we talking about here? And do we have to say, oh, that I'm right and the other side, they're heretics, which I've heard from both sides, that, whether one is more of a mystic, they see this rationalists as heretics, and one is more rationalist, they see the mystics as heretics. Is it really the case? I mean, heresy is defined by halacha as a very precise, halachic definition. And, neither one really, I feel, falls into that rubric of heresy as long as they agree to the basic orthodoxies that we agree on, the dogmas that have been generally accepted, even if not universally accepted, whether it's the 13 principles of Maimonides, whether it's the Ikarim of the Sefer Ikrim, whichever dogmas we accept as dogmatic, those are what we accept as as orthodoxy, as being having the proper doctrine that unites us. And one rabbi who I know, who most would identify as a mystic, he says really what we consider mysticism, it's the difference between like prose and poetry. It's not, they're just two different sides of the same coin. That if you interpret like an Amelia Bedelia, thinking that everything is literal, of course that lends itself to heresy. But to understand the poetic nature of the mystical aspects of Judaism, it shows it's not really a dichotomy, and ultimately that's where we can agree. Like we just finished Hanukkah, so you might just go and you light the Hanukkah candles, you did the mitzvah, and that's it, right? And why? To remember the miracle that happened, and whether it's the miracle of the war, whether it's the miracle of the candles, whatever, of the menorah, and that's it. And is it literal? Is it figurative? What is it? But then a mystic will go and he'll look at the words of the blessings we say. Of course, the mystic will accept that the miracles really happened, and he'll look and examine the words that we say and all the different things that are hinted to in the words. Lahadlik Ner Chanukah, and that the word Ner has these gematrias of different names of God, and the Sheos Nisim, and that these gematrias of names of God, and what that represents psychologically, mystically, all these different things. So which is it? And then they'll sit and they'll look at the lights for a half hour, and they'll say psalms, and they'll say that these psalms rectify this and provides protection for this, and all these different things. So which is it? Is it do we just go and we light a candle and then we're good, or is it this big mystical depth? And the sages, when the sages established Hanukkah, was all this mysticism in it? What's this all about? What are we talking about? And there's many answers we could give to this, but I think a simple answer that I think would satisfy everybody is that yes, we have all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Among those mitzvahs, among the commandments that we have in the Bible, or that our sages have established by virtue of the biblical authority we find in the book of Deuteronomy, inasmuch that among those commandments that we have what have been referred to by, for example, Rabbeinu Bachya and Bakuda, it's the Chovos Levavos, the duties of the heart, meaning that we have an obligation, and when we say the heart, we mean the mind. Rabbi Avigdor Miller, who was very much a rationalist, but he accomplished without, although he may have studied Kabbalah, he most likely did, without the Kabbalah, and he studied Chassidus. We know he quoted Chassidish Sfarim, but that wasn't the center of what he taught, and it wasn't the essence of who he was, and yet the essence of who he was the Chovos Levavos. And just the same, the Satmar Rebbe, Zechus Yigalenu, Satmar Rav, said that the basic ideas of Chassidus, of Hasidism, 99% of it is the Chovos Levavos. And so we see these two worlds coming together because we have these mitzvahs. We have mitzvahs, commandments, obligations, as Jews, as Torah believers, as Torah Jews, to the chovos halavavos, to the duties of the heart, beliefs, emotions, that we're required by the Torah, that the Bible commands us. God commands us in Scripture to have these thoughts, these beliefs, these knowledges, these emotions, these remembrances. And those are constant. Mishnah Berurah tells us that we have 6 constant mitzvos. And, I remember one rabbi, he once said that, the constancy is of these 6 mitzvos when we remember that God exists and we love God and fear God and we know there's no other gods. We know God is one and we're careful about what we look at and what we think about. So that's just the same. He says putting on tefillin, shaking a lulav. It's a mitzvah from the Torah, but it's a mitzvah we could do all the time, even when we're doing other mitzvahs. So therefore, when we're lighting the Hanukkah candles, we still have those 6 constant mitzvahs, which are mitzvahs, duties of the heart, at least 5 of them for sure. And really, Achrei Levavchem is also, all 6 of them are duties of the heart. And we have other duties of the heart, not only those 6. So, and when we master those mitzvahs, so then every other mitzvah that we do is under the rubric of those duties of the heart. And so therefore the emotions and the mind, both of which are the realms of what we call in Scripture the leiv, the levavos. That's why it says chovos halavavos in plural, that there is the emotional aspect and the intellectual aspect. And when these come combined with the other mitzvos we do, so then we achieve that mystical experience. And even the most rationalist will admit that there is that mysticism exists within Judaism. There were prophets, and that's a dogma of Judaism, that prophecy existed. At least at one point, most would say that it came to an end. But we're waiting. But we also would agree that we're waiting for it to come back. And even without prophecy, there is that mystical experience that comes through meditating upon these chovos halavavos, these duties of the heart, which become combined with every other mitzvah we do, as well as everything we do. And so therefore, there really is no dichotomy here between the rational and the mystical. Because, yes, they're looking at different sides of the same coin, but quite often you can rationalize any mystical teaching, and if you find it offensive or difficult to believe, well, you have to understand it's poetic, it's not literal, and really to interpret most of these things as literal is heretical. And on the other hand, also within the rational, there is the emotional and the intellectual that develops into a mystical experience. And when these come together, that's really our goal in Judaism, is that exclamation that we have of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Lord our God, the Lord is one. Meaning that the fact that He's one shows that there is no dichotomy, there is only this unity. And through this unity, even though we live in a world of seeming dichotomy, we look forward to that day of peace when all will be reconciled and show, as the prophet Zechariah says, V'hai Hashem l'melech al kol ha'aretz, and that day the Lord will be the king over all the earth. On that day, The Lord will be one, and His name will be one. We look forward to that day, and hopefully we'll see it soon. And in the meantime, let's try to live in peace and make peace between these seemingly dichotomy to show the unity among it all.